The Pacers lose the most unusual game of the season, an hour-long fire delay in the middle of the game, and they lose by 40 in Toronto. We'll talk about that, what they should do about Justin Anderson at the end of his 10-day contract, and of course, it's Monday, so it's Standings Watch on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers, as always. My name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the Westside Community News, and today we are talking Pacers Raptors, one of the craziest games of the season, not because the Pacers played well or there was an exciting finish. In fact, it was the worst Pacers performance of the season, but because there was an hour-long delay in the middle of the game, the stadium had to be evacuated. It was a wild night in Toronto. Justin Anderson's 10-day contract expired over the weekend. Going to talk about if they should bring him back, what the Pacers can do with their now newly opened roster spot. That is, as of right now, 8:30 p.m. on Sunday night on March 27th. And at the end, it's Monday, so we're doing Standings Watch. 2 weeks left of this NBA season. Where are the Pacers at in the inverse standings? Where are the other two important teams, the Cavs and the Rockets, in the standings as it relates to the Pacers in the draft? All today on Locked On Pacers, starting with their game over the weekend. Look, we'll talk about the game. And the Pacers got smoked. It was their worst performance of the season, 131-91 final in Toronto. Sorry, let me say that again. 131-91 final. That's the fifth Pacers loss by 40-plus points since they became an NBA franchise. I don't know what happened in the ABA days, but in the NBA portion of their existence, they have lost by 40-plus 5 times. That was the fifth. Miserable loss. Losing by 40 is always miserable. Look, the Raptors are more talented than the Pacers. The Pacers had 8 available players because Goga Bitadze did not play and Dwayne Washington, a hip injury, and could not play. That's the minimum number of players you can have. And they were on the road against a much better team that had length that gave them problems everywhere. Rick Carlisle wasn't there. A lot of key parts of the operation weren't there. The Pacers, of their available players, all of them except for Jalen Smith, Buddy Hield, and Tyrese Halliburton have spent time in the G League this season. And yet, 40 points should just never happen. It was an embarrassing Pacers loss if you're a fan of the team. They got completely smoked. They shot poorly from the field. They didn't generate good threes. They didn't even turn it over or foul that much, like is usually the case in these blowouts. They just couldn't stop the Raptors at all. The Raptors got whatever shot they wanted at any time during this game from 3, at the rim, or in the mid-range, off the dribble. Whatever they wanted, they got it. And the Raptors, 9 offensive rebounds, only 6 turnovers. They dominated the possession game. They ended up shooting more shots than the Pacers, including getting to the line. They controlled this game in every aspect. Their length gave the Pacers a ton of issues, and they're an interesting blueprint team for the Pacers to look at. I'll talk more about the game in a second, but just looking at what the Raptors are. They start Scotty Barnes effectively at shooting guard, right? Van Vliet starts at the 1, and then it's Scotty Barnes, Khem Birch, Pascal Siakam, and OG Anunoby as the rest of their starting 5. Just huge wings, huge, enormous wings, who all have some skill on defense or offense or both. And that is just a recipe for success. It makes life hard on the other team when you can defend that way. And when those guys can get you enough offensive utility, because Pascal Siakam's great, and because OG Anunoby can shoot threes, and that's just a great way to play. Precious Achiuwa, Chris Boucher adds that length off the bench. Thad Young, even a former Pacer. That is something I think the Pacers need to think about as they go into next season of team building. They have some rangy wings, but not a lot. They have a lot of guards and some bigs, but not necessarily guys who can do what the Raptors do. And I think that's an important blueprint from this game. So what actually happened in this game? Well, the Pacers sucked. Like I said, O'Shea Brissett played very well against his former team in his home country of Canada. 9 for 16 from the field, 8 rebounds, 4 steals, 2 assists, 21 points. He was awesome. Every other Pacer kind of stunk. Justin Anderson had a solid third quarter. He got to 18 points at the end of the night. Jalen Smith looked okay in his 4th start for the team. Buddy Hield hit some, meaningless second half threes to get his point total up, but nobody looked good. Everybody defended horribly for the Pacers. They were just completely out of whack. They were down almost 30. I think they got down to a 30-point deficit in the first half. 28 was the peak deficit in the first half, which was, ironically, when the delay happened. It was 38-66 when the real story of this game happened. The length was causing the Pacers issues. Brissett got them in a little bit. Then the Raptors just dominate. They go up 28, and then 4 minutes or so to go in the second quarter, the game stops, and there's firefighters on the court. And it was a really crazy scene. Like Lloyd Pierce, the acting head coach for the Pacers over the weekend, said, he thought in the first quarter he saw some people leaving a certain section of Scotiabank Arena, the Raptors' home stadium. I wasn't sure what was going on. And then the game kept being played, and then some players were like, yeah, I could kind of smell some smoke. They weren't sure what was going on. Finally, in the second quarter, the officials called the game. I forgot the official's last name. His first name's Zach. They called the game for a second, and they suspended it. And they said, everybody get out of the stadium. We got to deal with this. There was a fire burning in a speaker up above the crowd. And they thought there was no threat to public safety. They got everybody out to be sure. The firefighting crew came in, and while everybody was evacuated, they sent one up to the top of the stadium. He descended down on a cable and put out the fire. And it was really cool to watch him do it, but that meant there was a really long delay. It was a little bit over an hour. The teams were back in the locker room and completely disrupted the game. They weren't really sure what the safety situation was at the time, so they didn't let fans back in. So they finished the second half and the rest of that quarter with no fans. They had a really short halftime. As a result, it was a really wild scene. And on the Pacers side, a couple things happened. And really, this probably happened on the Raptors side too, but it's a little different because they were up a bunch of points. They go back to the locker room not knowing what to expect. They just saw a fire in the stands, basically. And when they went back, they weren't sure how long it was going to last, but they knew it'd be a while. So O'Shea Brissett and Lloyd Pierce kind of told us, like, some guys took a shower, some guys were on their phones, some guys were watching the Duke game, the Duke NCAA tournament game against Arkansas on their phones because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know if they were going to be playing again. And the other factor was, the delay was an hour, so you're out of your funk, so they have to come out and warm up. But, if you're on the Pacers, just O'Shea said that Justin Anderson was trying to hype up everybody and say, let's make history, let's make this huge comeback. But, like, you're on 28 points already. How hard has it got to be for them to get the motivation to come out of a break like that, ready to just give it your full go? And the Pacers did play better for the rest of the game from that point on, but they're already down 28. So, it really interesting. Since no one's hurt, it's interesting, like disruption to the game to see how players would react to something like that in the middle of a long basketball game, how that disruption handles the game. And O'Shea said, like, if you were down 5 or 10, it would have been really easy to come out and, we can come back for 5 or 10. When you're on 28, it's a little hard to get the focus back. And I thought that was all very interesting, part of the dynamic of this game. And, the Pacers kept it, they knotted it up the rest of the way for the second quarter, like from the fire break to the end of the quarter. They kept it tied. They win the third quarter, the Pacers do, but it didn't matter. Again, they were down 28 at that time. So they only win the third quarter by 2 points. Then the Raptors just blow the doors off of the Pacers in the fourth. Just a miserable Pacers performance, and the long delay making it a unique game certainly highlighted the strange nature of a night where the Pacers lose by 40. And yes, the story of the game can be many for the Pacers. They had a bunch of guys out. They didn't have their head coach. There was a fire delay in the middle of the game. The Raptors are just better than them, quite frankly. If they had won by 20, this would be a little bit different, but they lost by 40 points. Everybody on the Pacers was off, and their defense just has to be better. Learning how to win and be a better team going into next year is very important, and they're doing none of those things. And even with the guys available, which who knows how many of them will be back on the team next year, Justin Anderson certainly with his 10-day already having expired. Who knows? Jalen Smith, who knows if they can afford him? Terry Taylor's a free agent. Kiefer Sykes of the guys that played, if you count O'Shea Brissett's team option, like 6 of the 8 could be free agents this summer. There's a lot of who's going to be back next year. Like, these evaluation games and growing on defense games are important for this team, and they just completely put up nothing. Halliburton, even a guy who's going to be a key part next season, he played well, to be fair. 12 assists, 5 rebounds, was a key part of their offensive operation, the second best plus-minus of any Pacers who played behind Jalen Smith, but still had one of those games where he just didn't look aggressive getting a shot up, only shot 7 times, only had 7 points. The passing was there. 12 assists was most of anybody on either team. He's still an excellent lead ball handler, but he just looked off in this game. Why? That's the kind of things the Pacers need to figure out from these kind of games. How can they get better defensively? Which guys have it and don't have it? How do they get their key guy going for next season? Because it was just an off night, certainly, and maybe you take nothing from a game like that, where just all this weird stuff happened, and you lose Dwayne Washington, who's been playing every game, and it was Jalen Smith's first game in like a week, and the Raptors were on fire. Like, yeah, a lot of weird stuff happened, but they lost by 40, and that is the weirdest part that happened, because that's only happened 5 times in their NBA franchise history. So the Pacers need to look back at this game, figure out what went wrong, and figure out how they can address it both for the last couple games of this season and in the next season, because losing by 40 should not be a learning experience. Lloyd Pierce called it one of the most bizarre nights that's happened to him in his 15-year NBA career. Hard to disagree. It was very crazy not knowing what was going to happen, but glad everyone's okay, of course. Awesome job by the firefighting crew to get that going safely, and quite really an interesting game just from a coverage perspective to see what was going on and see how players would adapt to going from a game to completely stopped and not playing at all, back to playing. But it was a forgettable game. Losing by 40 just shouldn't happen, and the Pacers will hope to bounce back against the Hawks tonight. We'll, of course, be covering that on tomorrow's show. But next, I want to talk about Justin Anderson. He actually played pretty well in the second half of that Toronto game. He wasn't necessarily doing a lot in the first half, but he really came alive in the second half. In fact, Justin Anderson in the first half of that Raptors game had 11 points, but didn't shoot the ball necessarily really well, and they got smoked in his minutes, and really came alive with 11 second half points. But has not, to this moment of me speaking, has not signed another contract with the Pacers. He's no longer on the team. His 10-day has expired. What should the Pacers do with him and that open roster spot? Let's talk about all that. But first, I want to tell you guys about the good folks over at Built Bar who are making the best tasting protein bars ever. It's that time of year. A lot of people have given up on their New Year's resolution, but Built Bar is the best way to help you get back on track, especially if yours is about losing weight or keeping healthy. What is Built Bar? They're, like I said, the best tasting protein bars ever. 100% covered in chocolate protein bars that are actually delicious, unlike a lot of the ones you eat in the store that taste like chalky or crappy or really rubbery. They're not very good. Built Bar, on the other hand, is delicious. They taste like a candy bar. They come in a bajillion awesome flavors. I love the peanut butter brownie, but there's a ton of popular ones. The coconut varieties are all really popular. The cookie dough one's very good. And they're all low calorie but high protein. So it's a great replacement for your candy bar because, again, it's better and it's actually healthy. You can see all the macros on their website. Most have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. You got to try them. Go to Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order of Built Bars. That promo code, again, is LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On NBA. Hear about the latest and greatest going on around the league and association. Some crazy games tonight. Suns, Sixers just ended. The Suns just keep rolling, man. And you can hear more about that over on Locked On NBA. Let's talk about Justin Anderson, his 10-day contract. The Pacers newly, at least currently as I'm speaking, who knows what will change, open spot on the roster. They now only have 16 guys instead of 17. Justin Anderson signed to a 10-day deal on March 17th that ran through the 26th, as that game against the Raptors is now expired. He is now a free agent. Pacers, as of again, this recording, have not re-signed him. I don't know that it would happen late in the night, but maybe it will. And Justin Anderson's 10-day experience was pretty interesting. His first game against the Rockets, he had some nice defensive moments, but his offense looked a little off, and then really good against Portland, having 18 points in a start, and then really off the next two games, then really good against Toronto. So a mixed bag offensively, right? 2 really solid games, 6 for 10 for 18 points, exactly, ironically, his shooting line twice. Against Portland in a 31-point win and against Toronto in a 40-point loss. But then also he has these games against Sacramento where he goes 2 for 8 with only 5 points, and then another one against Memphis where he goes 3 for 10, and they just get completely destroyed. He had 10 points in that game. So his offense was really varied, and that was kind of hard to evaluate because out of the G League, it looked like that was going to be the thing that, at least for me, I was the most interested in evaluating. I kind of knew Justin Anderson could be a good or decent defender, especially, he was really good defending bigs. Like he could switch like I'd say 2 through 4, maybe 2 through 5, but not the best 5s. But anyway, he could switch a lot, which is important. We just talked about how the Raptors, get away with having all these wings that can do stuff. Like I thought maybe Justin Anderson could be that guy if his offense translated from the league leading G League score level. And some nights it looked like it did. Like against Toronto, he had some nice moments putting on the floor. He had some corner threes against the Blazers. And that was the key for his translation because in his past stops in the NBA, right, just didn't shoot the ball that well. His career high shooting percentage is 43%. That was the season he played with the Philadelphia 76ers in 2017-18. With the Pacers as of now, well, his contract is now over. We'll see what happens. He shot 37.7%, right? So that scoring from the G League was not necessarily there, which is a shame because his defense truly was pretty good. He's a good team defender. I think he can guard a lot of positions because he's a little bit bigger. He's got a lot of skill on that end of the floor. He's defended a lot of guys for a long time. He's been in the league for like half a decade now. So he was quietly an okay defensive player, and his offense was varied. If his offense was a little more consistent, like if he had one more good offensive game, I think it'd be pretty obvious that they should resign him. And if he had one more bad offensive game, I think it'd be pretty clear that they should say whatever as a 10-day experiment. So what should they do with this spot? Should they bring him back? How does this go? Because remember, a lot of the rest of the season for the Pacers is about evaluation. What works for them, whether it's a guy at a certain position, whether it's a certain guy fitting in with their ecosystem, whether it's a guy in a different role than normal. Just all figuring this kind of stuff out is important. So, Justin Anderson, 7.6 points per game, decent on the glass at 4 a game, 2.5 assists is actually the best he's ever done passing the ball. And some of that's that he played a bunch of minutes, but not a ton more than a prior stop. He played 21.6 minutes per game the second half of the season in Philly in 16-17. It was not even close to the assists he had with the Pacers, right? So some good skills in there. Defense was solid, but a lot of off nights in the shooting percentages were certainly not there. So today, as I speak to you, again, it is March 27th. And if the Pacers convert a two-way contract before the day ends, then they could backfill that with another two-way guy and have that player be a restricted free agent this summer. Maybe that still happens before you listen to this. I kind of doubt it, but maybe it does. And if that happens, then that makes sense. Maybe they convert Terry Taylor. Maybe they convert Dwayne Washington, bring someone else on a two-way. I don't know. But if that does not happen, they could still convert a two-way guy at some point. But it becomes less valuable because you can't backfill the spot. You're kind of crippled with what you can do with the rest of the roster spot. And that's why I think what will happen is the Pacers will sign someone. If they don't convert a two-way by the end of March 27th, I think what will happen is they will sign another 10-day, whether that's Justin Anderson or someone else. I have no idea. I have no idea what positions they feel like they need. I have no idea how they want to do it, but they could do it. You can do another 10-day on March 28th. It would run through April 6th, and then you could sign someone for the last 4 days of the season or whatever if they pop, or sign someone else and just try them for the last two games at that point. Who knows? Who knows? The Pacers do have some options. The timing is interesting because they have this huge gap between their third to last game and then their last two games, which are stupidly on a back-to-back. But if they sign someone again on the 28th and they make it through that April 5th, 6th range, whatever, they'd be playing in all but the Pacers' last two games of the season, right? So you're only evaluating someone you signed late for 2 days. So the timing makes it odd because they have this big 4-day gap all of a sudden after they play Philly on April 5th in their final home game. So 10 days are still valuable for about 2 more days before they become extremely dumb and you should just sign a player for the rest of the season if you're the Pacers. So what do they do? Well, I think Justin Anderson's a fine guy to bring back because they have no other wings. They have no other wings at all. Like Boucher Brissett has to play small forward sometimes, and even Lance Stevenson and Terry Taylor were playing small forward, as was Buddy Hield against the Raptors. Like, obviously, they're really banged up, and they didn't have Dwayne Washington, but they have no wings. And it's not just that they need someone to play the wing. I think that having a wing-type player, even if it's not necessarily a super strong impact player or someone who's blowing you away with high-impact performances every game, having a wing-type player lets you know how other guys fit around wing-type players, right? You can see that, with a guy like Justin Anderson out there switching and doing all this good stuff, like this kind of unlocked Boucher Brissett to do X, Y, Z. Or with a wing out there who could credibly hit the corner three, we were able to see Tyrese Halliburton navigate his way and do this and that and kick it out to the corner for those open shots. Having a wing, even if it's not necessarily a great player, lets you evaluate those kind of things. So that is kind of, to me, beyond that he was okay. He had 2 pretty good games. That is kind of the tip in the feather in Justin Anderson's cap, whatever that phrase is that he is the easiest and smoothest to just keep a wing on the roster. He's already played with this team for now 8 games this season. I just realized that I was reading his stats for the full season and not on his 10-day deal. When I said he shot 37%, I forgot about his 2 games earlier, but he still shot 43% on this 10-day. That's not as bad. So perhaps they want to bring him back, and that would make sense. They could have a wing. Perhaps they want to bring in another guard, right? Their backup guard rotation of Kiefer Sykes and Lance Stevenson both really struggled against Toronto, who maybe they want to see a guy that could fit in the next season since both of those guys have expiring contracts. I don't know. They also just played a game where Jalen Smith was their only center because Goga was hurt and Isaiah Jackson's dealing with this headache stuff. Maybe they want to evaluate another big, or maybe they just need another big to exist and breathe and give them credible minutes like they did with Amita Bryma last year on Nate Bjorkgren's team. Really any position makes some sense to me. The difficulty is, they don't have to do anything, I suppose, if they have enough healthy bodies to play. They kind of have enough to put together a team at every position. Winning is definitely not the key for this team for the rest of the year. They don't have to do anything. Saving the money is totally acceptable for them at this stage of the season. Normally I would say, fans, you should not care how a team spends their money, but getting cheap in a season where it's totally a loss, you have 50 losses now, is whatever. But they might need to sign someone just to field the team. Justin Anderson played against Toronto. He was their 8th guy. They need 8 to play. If they didn't have Justin Anderson that night, they couldn't have played. They would have had to either get Malcolm Brogdon in there, who is still on his reconditioning program or whatever they're calling it, make Goga play on his injury, make Dwayne play his injury. They don't want to play an injured player, right? So it makes sense to me to sign someone. That is the key reason I think the Pacers will sign someone to this roster spot is they need a healthy body on the court. I don't know who it is or what the position they're thinking, but they need a healthy body on the court. So that's why I think we will see the Pacers sign someone, probably if you're listening to this on Monday before the Hawks game, just so they have that guy under contract for that game. And because I think it'll happen sooner because of all these injuries, Dwayne Washington's questionable against Atlanta, so is Goga. A bunch of guys are still out, including Brogdon, Duarte, Jackson, all that. It's probably going to be Justin Anderson. Let me rephrase that. It makes the most sense that it would be Justin Anderson because he was with the team, just traveled with the team, has that familiarity, is already in town. They need wings. They need guys to play. That gives him a chance to be re-signed. That's not the main reason he would be re-signed. The main reason is that he played decently for them in 2 starts, and they're still evaluating what they need with wings. And seeing a wing play is certainly important. But another, again, reason they might bring him back is they need bodies, and he is currently a healthy body that has been with the team in recent days. So Justin Anderson's 10-day expired, and again, as I speak to you right now, or as you listen to me speak, he has not been re-signed. Perhaps that happens by the end of the day. Perhaps that happens on Monday, and the Pacers save 1 day of a minimum contract in money, whatever. But I have a feeling you'll see Justin Anderson get re-signed. And if not, I have a feeling you'll see somebody in general get a 10-day deal from the Pacers as they need players to field the team for this stretch run of the season. So in short, Anderson played decently on his 10-day. They need bodies to keep playing. Wings are the most important position, and Justin Anderson fits a lot of those. But we'll see what the Pacers actually prioritize with only 2 weeks left of a 25-50 season. Speaking of their record, standings watch time. Everybody's favorite thing this time of year, tracking the inverse standings. Where are the Pacers in the draft lottery? Where are the Cavs, the Pacers' first-round pick? How are they doing in the standings? How are the Rockets doing since the Pacers have their second-round pick, which looks like it's going to be very good? We got to talk about all that. But before we do, I got to talk about 2 wonderful groups of people. First up, the good folks, a new partner here for us at NBA Top Shot, the official licensed NFT of the NBA that lets you connect with hundreds of thousands of NBA fans. It's the future of being an NBA fan looks like. It's part trading cards. You get basically trading cards that are little video highlights. It's kind of like part stock market with millions of dollars worth of NFTs traded every day. It's kind of like fantasy sports where live performances matter. And it's kind of like an airline loyalty program for the NBA. There's a ton of key investors, including Michael Jordan, Kevin Durant, Will Smith, and Tyrese Halliburton, Pacers guard. People ask all the time, why would I buy a highlight when I can watch it? Well, it's not just about watching the highlight. It's about having an ownership stake in what's basically a stock representing the NBA's greatest highlights. If you were to tell someone in 1916 a piece of cardboard with Babe Ruth's face on it would be worth millions one day, everyone would think you're crazy. Well, this is the equivalent of that in the modern day era, according to Top Shot. And if you sign up today, the best way is to get yourself a new starter pack where you can pull an NFT of a superstar like LeBron or KD or star rookies like Cade Cunningham. You can complete challenges, which is the best way to earn more NFT rewards. NBA Top Shot is the future of being an NBA fan. Own officially licensed rare NFTs of the greatest moments from NBA history. Sign up today at lockedon.nbatopshot.com. Let's also talk about the good folks over at rockauto.com because there's a ton of makes and models of cars out there. It's impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. You got to go in there and do the questioning from the guy behind the counter who doesn't know anything. And then he's got to order the parts anyway because they don't have them right there in the store. So then you got to go back and pick them up. They aren't going to order from the warehouse that they have and what they happen to carry. That's a big waste of time. Go to rockauto.com instead, right in your home or in your pocket, and save time and money. You can save 50%, 30%, 100% more for the same parts by getting it at rockauto.com, a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. They have prices that are always reliably low for every single customer, and they have everything you could need for your vehicle. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck right locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. Thank you again for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. Go check out Locked On Now Next for the local angle on every game that happened in the NBA last night from our Locked On hosts for every single NBA team. Standings Watch. Got to keep it up. This is the second week of Standings Watch here on Locked On Pacers. I do this every year, whether the Pacers are pushing for the playoffs, pushing for the play-in, pushing for the top of the inverse standings for the first time since starting this, plus tracking other relevant standings-related trends around the NBA. Pacers currently 5th in the inverse standings, same spot they were last week. And a couple big things happened for the Pacers this week. First of all, they lost every game they played. They went 0-3. They lost to Sacramento. They lost to Memphis. They lost to Toronto. They went 0-3 this week. That is key for their inverse standings. They sit 5th pretty handily now. Now, what else happened to the Pacers this week? Well, the Kings are on a 2-game winning streak. One of those wins being the Pacers, but they also beat Orlando in a crazy overtime game this past weekend. So the Kings now have 27 wins, along with Portland. 2 games more than the Pacers have in wins. So, other stuff that happened, Detroit lost twice, Orlando lost twice, and Oklahoma City lost. Those teams now, Detroit, Orlando, Houston, they can all only get to 27 wins max if they win out. And OKC can only get to 29, and those teams are not trying to win. OKC is 1-9 in their last 10 games. The best record any of those teams have over their last 10, they only have 7 games left, is 4-6. So the Pacers are not getting into the top 4 of the lottery. I'm going to keep tracking what those teams are doing on the Locked On Pacers Twitter account where we track if you're from a Pacers perspective, what do they want to see happen around the NBA in every game? I'll keep including those teams, but the Pacers are not getting into top four. What's more important is teams 6 through 8. That's Sacramento, Portland, and San Antonio. Now, San Antonio has won 6 of their last 10, including 3 in a row. They now have 30 wins. The Pacers have to win out to get to 32 wins. Pacers are not falling to 8th in the inverse standing. So really it's about Sacramento and Portland for the Pacers. Can the Pacers stay ahead of those teams in the inverse standings is what they will be trying to do the rest of the season. The Kings, again, have won 2 games in a row, and they play the Rockets twice this coming week, Wednesday and Friday. They also have a game against the Pelicans this season still, who are not very good. And their last game's against the Suns, who have already locked up, or at least basically have locked up the 1 seed. They have locked up the 1 seed in the West on the last day of the season. Who knows who they're even going to be playing? It's pretty likely the Kings can get at least 2 or 3 more wins the rest of the season. So I think the Pacers can stay under them pretty easily. As for Portland, they are, I don't know what the heck they're doing. They've lost 3 in a row. They have 27 wins. They are playing names that not a lot of NBA fans know. So they're the team that's going to be a little harder for the Pacers to stay under in the inverse standings. They play the Thunder Monday night, and that's going to be a big game for the Pacers to potentially watch. Because if the Blazers get another win, that would be big time for the Pacers to see, because the Blazers also play the Spurs 2 more times and the Thunder again on April 5th. So it's possible the Blazers win 2 more games this season. If the Kings and the Blazers both win 2 more times this season, they would both get to 29 wins, and the Pacers, again, have 7 games left. They'd have to win 4 out of 7 down the stretch to get to 29. I think the Pacers are pretty close, barring 2 crazy upset wins, from basically locking up 5th. I mean, they're close to getting 5th, like, as their floor. They have a decently hard schedule outside of 1 Detroit game, the Pacers do. So if they just stumble, if they don't, they're obviously resting Brogdon. We see where that is for the Pacers. If they lose every game where it looks like they should lose for the rest of the season, then it seems likely that they'll finish with 5th, because, again, the Kings got these wins this week. Portland got a win last week, which, given who they're playing, was surprising. The Pacers have all playoff level opponents left. Their last 2 games could be against teams that aren't trying at all, but it's possible, very plausible, that the Pacers are 1 Kings and Portland win away from having 5th locked up. So in the inverse standings, the Pacers are looking good. They had a good week, seeing Portland get that win last week over Detroit, and Sacramento win 2 in a row. So that's the good news for the Pacers in standings watch. The bad news is, well, just about everything else. We'll start with the Rockets. The Pacers own the Rockets' 2nd round pick, which, when we talked last week for, the show was sitting pretty at the top of the 2nd round and 31st. And yeah, 2nd round picks aren't as awesome to discuss as 1st round picks. But last year, or if you'll recall, the Pacers traded up to get the 1st pick of the 2nd round from the Bucks, and then packaged that plus Aaron Holiday to get into the 1st round to get Isaiah Jackson. Having that pick is a solid asset to move up into the 1st round if the Pacers want to do so, and have 3 firsts in this draft. I don't know that that's something they do or don't necessarily want to do, but it is still an option that exists, and that's still just a valuable pick, right? It's a top 31 pick. The difference between that and the last 1st round pick is very, very little. So the Rockets won 2 games in a row this past week, which was pretty incredible given who their team is and who they've been playing. Now, granted, the teams they beat were the Blazers, who are terrible, and then the Blazers again 2 nights later, who are terrible. They won both of those games handily. And they have the Spurs, Kings coming up on the schedule. So it is possible that the Rockets bank a few more wins, which is bad for the Pacers. That pick could fall in the 2nd round. Now, it will probably not fall any farther than 34th. It's not like it's going to be a bad pick. But from a Pacers fan perspective, the best thing they could have, the Pacers are really hoping the Kings beat the Rockets both times those two teams play. That would be nice from the Pacers seat, because then the Kings would be, flying up the inverse standings away from the Pacers, and the Rockets would be tumbling down. So the Rockets are now in a 3-way tie with Houston and Orlando. They all are 20-55 as I speak. So that is something to watch for the Pacers. Is Houston winning 2 games while Orlando and Detroit lose 2 games certainly hurts the Pacers as their 2nd round pick falls, but they don't have the Houston first. That's the less important one. The more important one is the Cavs. The Pacers have the Cavs first if the Cavs make the playoffs, because it's lottery protected. And this week, the Cavs lost to the Bulls, and they fell to 7th in the East. The Raptors also beat the Cavs. The Raptors and Bulls beat the Cavs. Nightmare scenario for the Pacers was exactly that. So the Cavs are now in 7th in the East. They've been tumbling a bit recently. They are 4-6 in their last 10 games. They've lost 3 in a row. So they're 17th. If they make the playoffs, the Pacers get a pretty good pick out of this LeVert trade. But they're also 7th in the East, and they have to go through the play-in tournament to currently make it. The Nets are right on their tail. And now Kyrie Irving is playing in home games. They could fall to 8th. It's not feasible. It's not impossible they fall to 8th, although the Nets are currently losing at home to the Charlotte Hornets in the third quarter. We'll see where that game ends up shaking out. So the Cavs 1 game back of the Raptors, 2 games back of the Bulls for the playoff spot. They could still make it. They need to start playing better, though, and that's where the Pacers are getting a little scared, is seeing the Cavs continue to lose games. And they have the Magic Monday night. That's one they should definitely be winning, and the Magic don't want to be winning it. And then they play the Mavs at home, which is tough. And then they play the Hawks, who are fighting for play-in seeding, and the Knicks, who are still winning games. And then they close with Philly, Cleveland, Brooklyn, and Milwaukee. Tough outside of Orlando. They need to get 2 or 3 upset wins. I think that would make the Pacers feel a lot better about their chances of being a top 6 team and making the playoffs. And if they're in the 7-8 spot, if you just say the play-in tournament, every team who's in it has a 50% chance of winning every game. There's still a 75% chance that Pacers keep the pick. That said, they probably don't have a 50% chance of beating the Nets in a 1-game set. And then it's just down to 1 game, which is very stressful. You never want your pick life to hinge on a game like that if you're the Pacers. So that last week, the Cavs losing 3 in a row, the Bulls beating the Cavs, the Raptors beating the Cavs, it was a nightmare week for the Pacers and their potential second first-round pick. They'll be really hoping the Cavs pick it up this week and that either the Bulls or the Raptors or both stumble down the stretch. That is Standings Watch for this week. Thankfully, the schedule dictates that next week's Standings Watch will at least have some good news. But if the Pacers keep losing, that's the key one. That will be their Pacers' best pick is their own. And we'll, of course, be tracking that here on the show as well. Tomorrow, we're talking Hawks, whatever happens in Pacers Hawks. If the Pacers sign somebody, why they did it, what it means, all that sort of stuff. I imagine that, again, we'll be talking about something like that. And just in general, this whole week, we'll be covering all the Pacers game action, what they should be doing, how they should be focusing on these final 7 games of the season, as usual. You know how we do it here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at TEastNBA. If you're on YouTube, it's right there. I pointed to the wrong side. Thank you, by the way. We're on YouTube, and that is going very well. We're very close to 1,000 subscribers. I'd very much appreciate it if you guys helped me get there before the season ended. Thank you all for listening. Hope you had a great weekend, and we will see you tomorrow.